Good morning. We are going to take a walk up to the Blockhouse, and Jack's going to tell us a little bit about the building there and how it was used here in Mansfield, but also how they relate to forts and blockhouses back during the Revolution. Good day to you.
Welcome, sir. Welcome. Another fine day on the frontier.
Yes, you know, it always seems that Willard Rev War is cold and
rainy. Wouldn't be Willard Rev War without it.
So tell us a little bit about the building itself.
Alrighty. This is one of the two original blockhouses built in 1812 for the defense of this area. Originally, they were down on the square in Mansfield. There was a square log blockhouse that we have here and a round log blockhouse. The round log blockhouse disappeared years ago. This was somewhat saved. It went through a number of different owners, was used for a number of different things. It was used for a jail, a school, a church, courthouse, and eventually it was moved over the hill and was found in decay and was reconstructed in 2008, I believe, was when it was finished. This is a little bit different than our cabin because when you go inside, you'll see modern things like electric outlets and conduit that's showing on the inside of the walls, where when we rebuilt the cabin, all of the wiring and conduit is inside the chinking and the daubing, so it's not seen, and the outlets aren't seen. So come on in, and we'll talk a little bit about what this was used for.
This might be a good time to show them the difference between the notching we talked about. Okay.
Okay,
most definitely. Yeah, this is the cathedral style notch that was used back in that period.
So cathedral because it has this pitch, this high pitch to it,
like that. Yes, and then this portion, the top, the log that goes over that, is usually notched with a female notch, and it sits right on top. So this can't pull out then. And then the next one, of course, as you can see, is comes in.
The opposite.
Yeah, this. Oh, sorry.
And this is a very early type of notching.
Yes, the original blockhouse was built in 1812, as Jack said. So up until about the 1820s, then they changed a little bit, the notching. They wound up getting a little more sophisticated because here you could just do this with an axe. Later on, whenever they got saws and so on, you could use a square notch.
So if we were watching like those barnyard builders and things,
sure,
that's one of the things that they're using to help put a time on the cabin.
Yes.
They can just look at the notches themselves.
Correct.
That's pretty awesome.
All right.
It's unlocked.
It's unlocked. Okay. Just don't look at the modern conveniences and it'll be fine. But this is the first story of a typical blockhouse, and this design and size and style would have been used in the 18th century as well. So if this would have been a Revolutionary War and people were living in this part of the country at that time, they would have built a blockhouse that looked like this. In time of trouble, the families would come in here. You could pack them in pretty tight. You couldn't be sleeping much at this point, but women and even animals, if they could get some of their prized animals, would be inside this blockhouse. The upstairs, the second story, if you see here, this is all closed up. That would not have been like that in an original blockhouse. And the men would have been upstairs. There would have been portholes cut in the chinking or the logs, and the women would be down here loading their firearms and handing them up through the opening. And
so these would have been here, it's just the floor above that would be open.
right, yeah, they needed these to maintain the
structure.
the integrity. They cut this open, and there might be 3 of these open. And the women would load, pass the muskets up to the men upstairs. They would fire out at the attacking natives or British, hand the muskets back down. So the loading was done here, the firing was done up there. You'll notice too on the blockhouse that there's an overhang. The reason that overhang is there is the natives, if you're being attacked just by natives, they really didn't use ladders. So the only way into this blockhouse was through the door. So by having the overhang, if they were coming up trying to fire the door, set the door on fire, the men could shoot down through that overhang at the attacking natives.
Yeah, the outer board.
The outer board, they'd be upstairs again, the upstairs wall, and be able to fire directly down. So basically, there's only 2 ways to get in here. Through the door, there possibly would have been one window downstairs, but I don't know if they would have had a window downstairs. Upstairs is a little different story. Or they'd have to fire the roof. And the ladder could have been on the side like that. It could have been just a ladder they prop up to climb up into the upper area. And basically, that's the blockhouse. Most all designs look like this to some degree. You can even go to certain forts, 18th century forts, and they'll have blockhouses in each of the corners of the fort. If it's a 5-star fort, there'll be 5 of them. So it's really unusual not to see these in an 18th century fort. And then you can go to Fort Dobbs down in North Carolina, and that's a massive 3-story fort. And it's quite impressive. If you get a chance to see that, it's in Statesville. It's very impressive.
Excellent.
So you want to take a tour of the outside, or you want to go upstairs and see?
We can go upstairs quick and take a look, and then we can walk around the outside and maybe point out some more of the features.
Okay, Tom's upstairs, and he'll show you around.
As you can tell here, this is a much larger area, like Jack mentioned down below, that this is where most of the action, I guess, would take place. We'd have the shutters, they would open those up, or like he said, there would be openings on the walls, different locations through the chinking, or the dogging and chinking, that they could go out and shoot. This gives them a good vantage point for anybody who's attacking. And as you can see, there's ample room. This outside board that we talked about below, there was an open area here, so they can actually, if there was anybody, Indians attacking below, they could shoot down at them. And somewhere around here in the middle, or maybe several places, they would have a hole in the center of the floor, and they would hand their rifles in after they shot, or the string boards, I should say, and then a new one would be handed up to them so they can continue firing.
So this is the outside wall of the downstairs. So it's much more spacious up here, even though the floor would have been open to the below.
Correct.
It is much more spacious up here. I think I'd rather be one of the men up here with the muskets than women or children and animals down below.
That is probably true. Plus, it's going to be hard for them to start the lower portion of the logs on fire, but it'd be easier to go back and start the split shingles, hand split shingles above. So if a fire would occur, if they would fire, arrows or throw in torches with fire, that's the first thing that would go up. So at least if you're down below, you have a chance to get out. Here, you're kind of stuck until all the rest of the enemy is kind of driven away before you can get out. But yeah, we had, now this door here is a secondary that was put on because at one point after the blockhouse was no longer used, they converted the upstairs to, let's say, a school or a church, whatever it was. Like I said, then there's a jail down below. They had to put a side door So you can come up instead of bothering what's going on downstairs. They come in through this door, and they had ladder going down to the ground from here. When it was reconstructed, we left this as an area that if you needed to get access to load up something heavy, you can open it up, because through the window you really can't get much through there. But we don't really use it other than just for light and air circulation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Why don't we head on downstairs, and then we can take a quick walk around the outside and see what it looks like around the outside, on the other sides of the building. Are you gonna need some help there?
I can handle it.
All right.
And as you can see, these steps are more like a ladder. Very steep. That was to allow for more space downstairs.
Okay, so the outside of the blockhouse, you can see the structure that we were talking about earlier with the overhang. That would give the individuals upstairs the chance to fire down on any attacking natives or British if they were trying to set fire to the door. There would have been small portholes cut in the chinking daubing or in the wood, the logs themselves, as firing ports. We have one window here, and we have a window on this side and one on the back side as well. Whether those would have been here on the original blockhouse is debatable. But through the many years of use of this blockhouse for so many different functions, I'm sure they added windows to it, especially when it was used on a farm for hay storage and animal husbandry. So you can walk around the blockhouse. It's pretty much the same on all four sides.
Pretty standard construction, just like a log cabin.
Right, exactly right. And look at some, you can tell the original logs. Look at the massive, the gray logs are original, and they're just massive. It's just amazing that they could hand hew those logs and get them fairly square to build something like this.
So honestly, the construction of this, it's almost like having a cabin, a larger cabin on top of a
smaller cabin. Sure.
Cabin.
Most of the cabins in the 18th century were not two-story, as Tom mentioned earlier. But these were essentially used strictly for protection. In time of attack by an enemy, individuals from around the area would meet at the blockhouse and fort up inside. If you had a cabin on the frontier and you were 3.5 miles from here and you forted up in your cabin, it's not very smart, because you've got just your family inside there, and here you've got numerous people, 10, 20 people maybe inside this, to protect themselves, where in a cabin you've just got your family.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about the blockhouse. We'll be back here in 15 minutes.
Yes, sir.
With another segment. Thanks so much for watching.
Put the hand cart back inside.